Good morning, St. Paul the Apostle. Welcome to our Black History Month homily. Delighted to say that 3 of our own members of our parish family have accepted the invitation to preach this year. Chris Gittins, Charles Ozood, and Tiffany Haddock. So please join with me in welcoming them as our Black History Month homilists.
Good morning. My name is Tiffany Haddock. I'm a member of a millennial group called Illuminate at St. Paul's the Apostle Rexdale. Our group has been in much discussion about recent events of social injustice, and there have been numerous examples, even by the shocking death of George Floyd last year. Being a Black millennial over the past pandemic year has been eye-opening, to say the least. With everything from the George Floyd death, I am reminded of how Black people have been treated differently because of the color of our skin. Black Lives Matter protests took a toll on me negatively because it hurt seeing people being treated poorly. We all know what's right from wrong, and these recent actions were not right. Every time I turned on the TV, either one of those incidents was making headlines. It made me feel sick, and still does to this day. I've learned a lot of things during this time, such as speaking up for what you believe in. Everyone has a freedom of speech. I've also had a lot of reflection time to myself to stop and take a deep breath. I realized that I was always busy. I've learned that even more now, that making people smile or laugh is one of the greatest healings for a person. During these times, people are feeling down. Mental health awareness is at an all-time high. The world needs a lot of healing right now, and we all need to come together during these times to achieve this. I encourage you to help someone smile or laugh each day, and you will see how much of a difference this makes. There's a saying that laughter is the best medicine. It may help to connect virtually over Zoom or WhatsApp. It could be a phone call to say hello or how are you doing. In the past week's gospel reading, Mark says that Jesus was with his disciples, James and John. When Jesus was near, people were healed. Our world definitely needs healing more now than ever. We can each do something small to help others. I know this time may be a long road back to normal, but I will leave you with 2 quotes that have been encouraging to me by Dr. Martin Luther King. The first is, if I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way. The second is, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. My prayer and hope is that all of us will keep moving together in faith for a better, more just society, and we can start now in this Black History Month. Thank you.
Hello and good morning, everyone. It is so great to be with you all today. My name is Charles Ozude, and I would like to share with you what it has meant to be a young person, a young Black millennial, in the current context of the COVID pandemic as we celebrate Black History Month this month. So many of you may not know this, but when I was younger, I experienced another personal pandemic, which was the poliovirus. Now, Canada has been polio-free for nearly 50 years, but for various millennials in Canada, this is a completely foreign concept. But being from Nigeria, my home country didn't really become polio-free until 2016. So I was therefore born into a pandemic. My mother in those days was a community nurse and would go from street to street and to schools, giving kids like myself the polio vaccine to inoculate us against the virus. And it was thanks to these efforts that I was able to thrive as a child without fully understanding the positive impact this singular public health effort had on my long-term health and well-being. But many years on, what does this mean for me now in a different country and with a different pandemic? Well, as a Black African Canadian millennial, and I want to emphasize that I am Black, I am African, I am Canadian, and certainly millennial, who works in the health fields, I cannot appreciate enough the efforts of healthcare workers, especially long-term care workers, who tend to be predominantly immigrant and racialized women. And as COVID has exposed, they are really the backbone of healthcare. But seeing them put their health on the line, despite being low paid and despite being short-staffed and certainly being precariously employed, has been very sobering for me. And this has personally meant leaning into our sufferings as Black communities because we are disproportionately killed by the pandemic. Our communities are also hit hard financially due to pre-existing systemic oppressions and disadvantages like poverty, inadequate living conditions, unemployment, or in other cases, unstable employment. And it is these conditions that put our lives and livelihoods at risk, but they have further galvanized me to speak my truth and louder about social injustices, specifically speaking out against anti-Black racism in all of its forms, by law enforcement or by fellow citizens or institutionally. But importantly, it has meant standing in solidarity with my brothers and sisters in recognizing our power and resilience when we raise our voices and take action together. So for me, that is really what Black History Month represents. It represents bringing to light the history and the struggles faced by people of African descent in Canada, which frankly is a history that has oftentimes been swept aside, swept into the shadows, under the rugs. And so that's why it's important that for this 25th anniversary of Black History Month in Canada, I want to celebrate Black people's centuries-old history of facing, fighting, but yet overcoming social injustices. But in spite of all these challenges brought about by the pandemic, I've been reminded even more daily to be grateful. Because the truth is, despite all that's going on, I am still very much blessed with good health, even after having recovered from COVID last year. I'm able to wake up every morning not having to worry about food or shelter or water or clothing or really any basic necessity of life. I have a job where I can work comfortably from home, which is a privilege in these times, not to mention the stability and the security that it provides. And so keeping these things in perspective has given me a greater level of gratitude to really count my blessings, which I doubt would have been possible without the pandemic. I have also been humbled through empathizing with families around the world and in our own very city of Toronto who are suffering incredibly right now, be it through the loss of a loved one or through physical, emotional, and mental health struggles, especially teenagers right now whose mental health is really taking a dip. They can't gather with their friends. So I really empathize with them. I also empathize with people who are suffering from social isolation, others suffering in social isolation. Then of course there are also people who have to choose between either staying home and going hungry or going out to make a living, but with real risks to their health, which is never an ideal choice to make, but one we just still have to make nonetheless. But most of all, I have been strengthened by love, the love that is showered on me daily from friends and family from all around the world, especially those who are far away. Because I recognize that even though we cannot see each other and definitely cannot touch or hug each other right now, the love remains, and this love transcends distance, it transcends boundaries, and it transcends borders. Which is why in the midst of all of this, we cannot forget God's unconditional love for us. Because even though we cannot gather physically and may not be able to do so in a long while to come, His love means that we're never alone. So, in conclusion, I am really looking forward to this year, 2021. And quite frankly, I am looking forward to it with an abundance of caution. But I'm hoping that I can use this unique time, and we all can use this unique time in history, to really just slow down and be more mindful and to reflect on my key life values, and most of all, to keep reaching out to people who I care about in my life. So that is it. Have a memorable Black History Month celebration. Thank you.
Good morning. It's nice to be here. 2020 was a challenging year for all of us. We had a health crisis, a financial crisis, and a social crisis. The only thing is that the health and financial crisis are relatively new developments, whereas the social crisis of racism and hatred has been around for a very long time. It may be new to some people, but it's actually a very old problem. And although the focus of the past year has been on the United States, racism is also an issue in Canada too. In 2018, the Ontario Human Rights Commission published a report that Black people in Toronto are 20 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. Now, according to that report, white people are more likely to carry weapons, and white people are more likely to attack police officers. But Toronto police are still more likely to kill Black people, 20 times more likely. So racism isn't just a part of Black history, it's a part of Black present. It's a part of our everyday lives. It's not just in Alabama and Mississippi, it's also in Toronto and Mississauga. Over the last couple of months, many people have asked, well, how do we fix this problem? How do we move forward? How do we heal these wounds of racial injustice? Well, the gospel reading from a couple of weeks ago talked a lot about healing. Jesus comes and heals the sick. But if you read further, he eventually sends the disciples out to do the healing. He gives them the power to heal, and they go out into the world to heal others. Eventually, the story is no longer about us waiting for the Lord to heal us. It's about us helping to heal each other. It's about us being active participants in the healing process. So the question becomes, how do we as Christians do that? How do we go about healing a broken world? Now, there are many possible solutions. There are many suggested remedies. But in my opinion, no matter what path you choose, it has to be rooted in a strong foundation of accountability and commitment. First of all, we have to be accountable. We must hold ourselves and those around us to account. We have to take personal responsibility for our actions. We have to be able to ask ourselves, are we part of the problem, or are we part of the solution? When most people think about racism, they tend to focus on how they treat everyone in their day-to-day lives. But they often overlook larger issues, like how they vote. For example, someone may treat the Black people in their lives very well, but then they go out and vote for conservatives, whose policies often hurt Black people. It's counterproductive. And we have to be willing to see the hypocrisy in that. We have to be willing to take personal responsibility for our actions. Conversely, if you're a Black person, well, do you support other minorities in their struggles against racism? For example, do you speak out when Indigenous people are being persecuted? Or do you just sit back and complain that no one will help you, but at the same time, you're not willing to help others? We have to be willing to see the hypocrisy in that. we have to be willing to take personal responsibility for our actions. In addition to accountability, we need commitment. We need to acknowledge that the road to the promised land is a long one, and it takes a long-term commitment to get there. Eventually, the media coverage will die down, and people will move on. Will you move on as well? Right now, it's very fashionable to speak out against racism. It's very trendy. It wasn't trendy 2 years ago, and it might not be trendy 2 years from now. But when it's no longer trendy, will you still care? Are you here for the long haul? Again, no matter what path you choose, it will be a long road. And unless we're committed to that long walk, then any initiative is bound to fail. We have to be dedicated, and we have to be committed. And I believe if we are committed, if we're willing to hold ourselves to account and take personal responsibility for the problem, I believe that we can fix this problem of racism. I believe that we can finally overcome. If we are truly dedicated, if we're willing to ask uncomfortable questions, if we're willing to have uncomfortable conversations, if we're willing to rise to the challenge, then I believe that we could build a better world. A world that works for all people, a world of justice, and a world of love. The Lord has already given us the tools, and He sent us out in the world. Now it's time for us to work together to heal each other. Thank you.
On behalf of the people and parish of St. Paul the Apostle, we give thanks today for the ministry of Chris and Charles and Tiffany, and for their fine words that they have shared with us on this Black History Month service and homily. Take good care, everyone. God bless.